On Wednesday morning, Governor Don Carcieri of Rhode Island sponsored a breakfast for the Rhode Island delegation. And we had a number of great speakers, one of which was Joe McCain, brother of Senator John McCain. And I have some clips from his speech.
Well, we're all here. And in a sense, I'm talking to the choir, but there's a message that I personally have for the choir. And that's it. Of course, we all know there are lots of reasons why people pick to vote for president. Most of it, I think, is what party they belong to. Sometimes it's that single issue that they think will make or break a nation. But in this case, it's our job to get this out that we're voting for one particular issue. Could I have the... you all recognize this from movies or those of you who have been in the service like the general. One of the most important pieces of gear that a pilot has is his flight jacket. You know, it's leather, it's cool, along with those aviator glasses. But they wear this all the time, and so on October 26, 1967, as he'd done hundreds of times, as he'd left carriers, John sat in the ready room aboard the USS Oriskany, the carrier, and got a briefing to go hit the heart of the enemy downtown Hanoi, and he hung this jacket up on the hook on the USS Oriskany and expected to see it in a few hours. He didn't see it for 5.5 years, because as he jokingly says, I took a left when I should have taken a right, and a flying telephone pole was there. What happened to him is he got shot down, he got hit by a SAM missile, almost completely tore his plane apart. He winds up ejecting at about 800 feet, and as unlucky as that is, he ejected upside down, but he ejected into the only lake in downtown Hanoi, otherwise the impact would have certainly killed him. And the wings come off and the plane's destroyed. It breaks both arms, a leg, and then once he was in the lake, the Vietnamese pull him out, and some guard tries to question him, and of course he's battered and insensate. They think he's being rude, I guess, and they took a rifle butt and smashed his right shoulder. And as you hear the often story, John can't get his hands really above his cheekbone, so before he goes out and talks or speaks, Cindy or some aide has to comb his hair and make sure that he's okay. Now, this is not to go over so much the oft-told war story of John McCain, but it's to illuminate something that you hear a lot. And that's that for most of 2 years, John McCain was in strict isolation, except for the times he was brought out for interrogation, because the North Vietnamese were then trying to use the POWs as leverage, and the word started to get out about how brutalized these POWs were, and they looked for ways to ease this dark image. And one of the ways they looked for was the Crown Prince. Now, they called John the Crown Prince because his father was not only a 4-star admiral, but he became, as most of you know, commander of forces, commander of all U.S. forces in the Pacific. That means the Army, the Air Force, Navy, Coast Guard, Marine Corps, and Vietnam, and the POWs. And so they were going to try to set up a sort of a humanitarian public relations gig, releasing John McCain, one of the worst wounded POWs. And John said, no, I cannot accept release before my fellow POWs, and only then will we do it when we're ordered by our commanders. Well, they worked on him, apparently, for several months, and apparently trying to cajole, they weren't beating him or anything, but they were just trying to persuade him to accept this release, and he said, no, I can't do it. And as he writes in his book, The Faith of My Fathers, he heard that North Vietnamese cadre say, things are going to be very bad for you in medicine. John said no. He had this chance to do that, and he said no. And I think that that's not just an example of, to me, what is unimaginable courage, but it's that word that we hear about John. That is the demonstration of character. And when that proverbial phone that you keep hearing about rings at 3 a.m., that's the guy you want answering that phone, because that's the guy that in one of the darkest moments of his life made what he now calls the single best decision he ever made in that life. And that's to decide that his job was not to serve himself, not to take a way out, but to serve the United States of America. I think most of us are realists, and we recognize that we're probably headed for some more challenging times. And it's very discouraging to some, but I've studied history, and that's okay, because been there before. We've had a revolution. We've had a bloody, terrible civil war. We've been through 2 world wars. We've been in many, many conflicts. And depending upon the economist you talk to, we've been somewhere between 11 and 13 major economic crashes. The way we get through these periods the best, and how we wind up on the other side of these periods, is who is commander of the ship of state. And I think, I mean, there are so many crucial times to act. There are so many mind-blowing things. And some presidents shy away from them. Some presidents try to finesse them. John McCain will be the one that will meet these crises head-on, face-on, and he will make a decision without guile, without pretense, completely ingenuously. He'll do it honestly. Now, they're going to be hard times, though. Inexpedient times, not understood by the public or press. They're going to appear to be impolitic. They're going to appear to be inappropriate. But these are the times for John McCain. And I tell you, when that phone rings at 3 a.m. or 3 p.m. or after lunch, during the Super Bowl, middle of the night, during dinner, the hand you want picking up that phone is that of John McCain. And that's the point of his candidacy, I believe. We need John McCain near that phone. Now, one other thing, and I know you have lots of speakers, and I don't want to overstay my welcome, but I've been a newspaper reporter, and I've been in other political campaigns, and regardless of the perception, I don't think that presidencies and other important campaigns are really one at the top. The competing ads, the editorials that argue with one another, the one state senator calling another one. It's when people like you leave places like this with a message and a mission, and to go out and tell your friends that you simply have to vote for John McCain at this crucial period in life. And you try to convince their friends to convince their friends, so that people go to the polls and they know exactly who they're voting for and they know exactly why. We're going to have one of the most interesting, most productive presidents in the history of this country, and I think it's fair to say a great president. And he's got this running mate that does the same kind of thing he does. Together, I don't care what the editorials say or what MSNBC says, or these 2 people are going to sweep the land, and they're going to right a lot of wrongs. Anybody who thinks they're going to bring up pork or earmarks to John McCain had better think twice, because we know exactly what he's going to do. He's going to hold that thing up before the American people and tell us, look at this bill. As you know, John's a pretty funny guy. He's going to get more laugh lines out of some of these bills that they send up there. And to be realistic, I think, frankly, most of these people are not even going to bother with John, because he's been fighting them every year, pulling up those lists of golden fleece and so forth. He's just not going to do it. Now, one last thing, and I doubt if you will, but if any of you all run across Osama bin Laden, I doubt if he's in Rhode Island, but if you run across Osama bin Laden or any of his ilk, those that murdered more than 3,000 Americans who were simply trying to get a day's work done, or trying to take a flight to the West Coast, and were murdered, if you run into him, you tell him there will be no place to hide. Not from John McCain. Rhode Island, neighbors to I was born in London, Connecticut. Thank you very much, and let's go out and get this man elected.